Hey everybody, welcome to another thrilling edition of Ask Ron. This is Ask Ron number 14. We're getting up there. We're in the teenage years now. So first question comes from One Lat Man. Apparently he's only got one lat. Of all the bodybuilding shows you've been to, do you have a couple that stand out as your favorite? And who were some of the most impressive pros you saw? First of all, two shows stand out, and they were early in my career going to pro shows. So the first one would be the 1991 Mr. Olympia in Orlando. That was my first Mr. Olympia that I ever attended. I was working there. We were doing the coverage for ESPN, and it stands out because it was historic. It was Lee Haney's 8th and final win. He retired on stage at 31 years old. That was a pretty big part of bodybuilding history to be witness to. And it was also the first Mr. Olympia competition for Dorian Yates, who took second place to Dorian at that show. Dorian was very impressive. Dorian really pushed Lee. And you still had a ton of other guys in the show. You had like Rich Gaspari, Lee Labrada, Vince Taylor, Samir Bannout was in it. I mean, it was a great lineup. It was stacked. It was a really great Olympia. Over 20 guys. I want to say there were 22 or so. And it stands out because it was my first Mr. Olympia. It was a really big deal to me. Olympias are still a big deal to me, but that was the first one. I'd been looking in the magazines at the Olympia coverage for a few years before that. I had a couple Mr. Olympia competitions on VHS tape that I would watch from past years. So to actually be there live in person watching these guys battle it out for the top title in the world, it was a big deal. I was 21 years old. I might have just turned 22. I'm not sure what time in September took place. Anyway, that show, and the other one would be the 93 Pro Ironman. I did not go to the Arnold Classic that year. That was Flex's first Arnold Classic win, but this was the pro debut, the first pro show ever for Flex Wheeler, who had won the USA the year before. I had also been there for that. So to see Flex step on stage for the very first time as a pro and just dominate, it was a sight to see. You know, he looked amazing. He looked even sharper, obviously, at the Arnold a week or two later. But it was something we had never seen before. You know, that combination of the shape and the mass and those round muscle bellies and, you know, his presentation, everything just blended together. He was a sight to see. It was also the pro debut of Paul Dillette. Paul had won the North American the year before and turned pro. So this was his first pro as well. And Paul, as you should know, was just a monster. He was one of the first mass monsters. Just so wide, such wide, enormous shoulders, huge arms, huge legs, big back, little waist, you know. Never quite had the back detail and the presentation to be one of the top guys. He was never really fighting to win the Arnold or the Olympia in my eyes, but he was very, very impressive. We'd never really seen anything quite like Paul Dillette. Second place at that show was Lee Labrada. Lee was on his way out. He only did a couple more shows after that. He was still a sight to see. He was still a master of presentation. Condition was on point. Shape, symmetry, structure. Lee was an amazing bodybuilder. Vince Taylor was in that show. Vince had just started competing he'd been a pro for a couple years already. I shouldn't say that, but he was one of the top guys. He was also an amazing poser. He was the first one that did that Terminator routine, as you may or may not know. He did that for the first time at the 91 Olympia, but he was still doing variations on it for quite a while after that. Vince was great. Paul Dillette. J.J. Marsh was still good. He was in that show. The short guy, Flavio Baccianini from Italy. He was 4'10", shortest IFBB pro ever, always shredded. Franco Santoriello, who I had looked up to when I started reading the magazines, because, you know, that's what I wanted to look like, a little jack dude. He was huge arms, huge legs, trained his ass off. Also had Robbie Robinson in that show, a legend, obviously. Mike Ashley, another great bodybuilder. The late Ray McNeil. Ron Love in 11th place. Thierry Pastel from France. So that 93 Pro Ironman was a really great lineup. And like I said, important for the fact that it was the first time we ever saw Flex Wheeler and Paul Dillette as pros on a stage. And it was, you knew from that moment they were both going to be spectacular. They were going to do very, very well. Flex obviously did do very well. He would win many shows in the 90s. Paul had his share of wins and a lot of very high placings as well. They were both excellent. Impressive pros. The most impressive pros I've ever seen. So many, and you know, I don't want to sound like the guys today aren't impressive. They absolutely are. Of course they are. Of course they are. But you know, maybe it's because I was younger to the sport and it was still fresh to me. It was mostly these '90s guys. I was always impressed with Flex, like I said, Paul Dillette, Ronnie Coleman. When I started becoming aware of him around '95 or so, I was very impressed with him, and he just got better and better every year until by '98 he'd won his first Mr. Olympia of 8 in a row. Dorian, obviously, very impressive to see. And Dorian was one of those guys, I know you've heard this before, but pictures and even videos really didn't do him justice. To see him competing in front of you, to see that physique live in color in front of you, he did not really project that well in pictures. I don't know why. But he was so much more impressive in person. He really did dominate those lineups. Even when he had a torn bicep, even when his condition was a little bit off, he was still just intimidating, dominating. Flex, obviously. Kevin Leveroni. Can't say enough about Kevin. Kevin was an amazing sight to see back in the day. Sean Ray, someone I looked up to from the very first magazine I picked up in fall of 1987. Just a beautiful physique. Nasser, big monstrous freak. So was Marcus Rule, just absolutely enormous. Lee Priest, incredible, probably one of, if not, let's say this the best short bodybuilders ever, maybe. I know we can debate that all day, but he was damn impressive, damn impressive. Chris Cormier, obviously, incredible structure, mass, conditioning. Chris was great. Mike Francois was only there for a couple of years as a pro. Unfortunately, he got colitis, and that sort of took him out of the sport. But you know, for a very long time, he was, no, I shouldn't say a very long time, for a very brief time, he was on his way up to become, I would have had him as a possible Mr. Olympia for sure within, I would say, another 2 or 3 years after he stopped. I think he could have done it. He had a very similar physique to Dorian. You know, same type of thick, dense muscle mass and pretty decent shape, really wide clavicles. Did not have a gut, just monstrous thick traps, lats, shoulders, arms, legs. Mike was a beast. Who else? Charles Claremont from England. I think that's somebody that's so underrated, and a lot of the modern fans don't even know who he was. Charles was amazing. Charles from Great Britain. He had been a paratrooper before bodybuilding, and just the little tiny waists, incredible arms with peak biceps, sweeping quads, just beautiful shape and proportions, and he had plenty of size. You know, he was always high up in the placings, deservedly so. Aaron Baker, Batman, another guy that was really underrated as far as I don't think people talk enough about him, given how good he was. Aaron was really good. I mean, I saw one pro Ironman, I think it was the year Flex came back, so it was probably '95, the year he came back from broken neck, where I would have given that show to Aaron. He looked really good. Who else? Jean-Pierre Fuchs, another big mass monster. You know, there were so many great guys. I mean, I was lucky enough to be working in the sport and going to a lot of the pro shows when these were the stars. It was quite narrow. We just had an amazing talent pool to draw from. I don't necessarily think it's a case of the guys today don't train as hard or they rely too much on drugs, so much as for whatever reason. We just had a lot of talent in pro bodybuilding back then. There's still a lot of talent in pro bodybuilding, obviously. Obviously, these guys are great. You know, Phil, Kai, and those guys. Which brings me to my next question. Which bodybuilder, male or female, had the best posing routine, in my opinion? Most entertaining, I'm going to give that to Kai Green. You know, those routines, they're just like, it's almost like a Cirque du Soleil show or something, with the muscle control and these weird poses where he's on his head and all kinds of, Kai's just, you don't know what's coming next. He's got this crazy amount of mass, good shape. It's to see all that in one package posing, it's phenomenal. He's spellbinding. But as far as the best posers in the traditional sense of the word, I would have to give that to either Bob Paris or Lee Labrada. They were both masters, just masters. And you know, I can't really comment on Ed Corney or Frank Zane because I never saw them compete. But I did see Bob Paris compete a few times. I did see Lee Labrada compete a few times. And yeah, just perfection. Everything was just perfect. Every little hand motion, every transition, every pose was just, you know, tilted at just the right angle to make them look their absolute best. You know, they were phenomenal. And as far as a female poser, There was a woman who was popular in the mid to late 80s for the most part, named Diana Dennis, top pro, and she was such a good poser that she was as in demand as any of the top male champions of the era, if not more so. Promoters would hire her because they knew she put on a great posing routine. You know, she did one where she had this big spider web thing she would bring out and do this crazy routine, crawling all over the spider web and flexing. She did a lot of mixed pairs back in the day with, you know, when that was a thing, and she won a lot of those, rightfully so. She was really good. So now I get to some actual information that you might be able to apply to yourself. So, sorry, I don't know who asked me this. Can you go over some of your injuries and nagging pains, how you train around them or found ways to take care of them / heal them? Heal them, I wish. That'd be awesome if I healed any of these injuries. I can't really say. I guess I'll start with the overriding injury for me since the first time I heard it at age 18 has been my lower back. And, you know, I heard it many, many more times. I heard it squatting, I heard it deadlifting. You know, for a long time I was doing these, I'm going to call them assisted squats with up to 725 pounds because I always needed a spotter under my armpits, and I don't know how much I was using, how much weight I was actually doing. Obviously not the whole amount. I never said I was doing that much weight on my own. It was a group effort. But it was just putting so much pressure on my spine. Anyway, I've had a couple herniated discs, so I haven't had an x-ray in a long time. I'm sure they're still herniated. So what did I do? You know, I worked my lower back with hypers and so on to make it stronger, but I still found as time went on, as I got older and older, that I just can't squat very heavy anymore. It's just not safe for my lower back. I can't deadlift very heavy. It hasn't hurt my legs because they grow very well, and I did squat heavy for years and years, and I can still do heavy leg presses, heavy hack squats with no issues for the most part. So my legs didn't suffer from not being able to squat. I don't think I've gone over 365 in at least, I want to say 6, maybe 8 years. It's been that long since I had 4 or 5 on my back for squats. Not deadlifting, I can't say for sure that it's hurt my back development, especially the thickness, but I suspect I would probably have a better back if I'd been able to deadlift heavy all these years. It's just never been. I've had people that were very good at the lift, you know, watch me and try to fix my form. It doesn't matter. No matter what I do, it's just my lower back. It's a weak point, and it's one false move and it's gone, and then I'm in agony. And I don't know how many of you guys have had lower back injuries, but you know it sucks. It's the worst because you're in pain all the time. You can't do simple things like put your own shoes and socks on. Getting in and out of cars when your back is jacked up can be hard. Everything's hard. You're in pain all the time, and it affects every aspect of your training. There's very little that you can do. You have to be very, very careful. So that's what I did. I've gone to plenty of chiropractors for years and years. I've had massage therapy, plenty of that stuff. None of it has alleviated my back pain or fixed the issue to the point where I can go heavy on those things. And at this point in my life, at 48, it doesn't even matter to me. But for those of you who have lower back injuries, I would definitely seek out treatment, chiropractic treatment, deep tissue, and, you know, work hard at strengthening your lower back. Go very slowly, obviously, with things like hypers. But if you can strengthen it, your chances of injuring it again are going to be much lower. I know Louis Simmons preached the glute ham raise machine is something that he personally developed and used to rehabilitate a terrible lower back injury he had, and he came back and was, you know, setting world records. So ham glute machine, if you got one too, would be the way to go. I'm sorry I don't have more medical, you know, expertise to impart on you about that, but I'm not that bright with injuries. I've had a little bit of knee pain. Can't say I've really done anything to rehab it. I would just take it easy on my leg workouts for a couple weeks and it would be fine. The only other ongoing issue is my left shoulder. So I've got bad arthritis in both shoulders. It was worse on this side. I had a surgery called a decompression in 2011 where they basically went in there and they scraped out some room inside the socket, inside the acromion, to make more room for the joint to move. But I've had rotator cuff tears. I've had all kinds of things. There's a bone spur in there that I don't think it really affects anything. It's just real nasty to look at on an x-ray. but that has affected my training. I've had some work done on it. Maybe if I was more aggressive with the rehab, it would be better. But I mean, at one time I was able to dumbbell press overhead 120s any old day. And if I was feeling really good, 130, maybe even 140s, I could do that. Flat press, for chest I could do 130, 140. If it was a really great day, 150. For flat and incline, those days are long gone. Even barbells are kind of problematic. I have to stick mostly to Smith machines, hammer machines. If I use dumbbells, I'm using moderate weights. I'm really squeezing. I'm going a little higher on the reps. And that's what I've found has been most useful to me in general with all these injuries I've had. I also had a tricep tear, but that's not an issue anymore. It's repaired and it's not an ongoing issue. It's, as I've gotten older and my joints have been beat up from 35 years of training, the heavy weights, for the most part, I can't go as heavy on most things like I used to, and that's okay, because I have a great mind-muscle connection. I can take a more moderate weight and squeeze. So maybe if I was doing 120-pound incline presses, 130-pound incline presses with dumbbells years ago all the time, now maybe I'll use 80s or 90s and really squeeze. If I'm feeling really great, I can go 100, but that's about it. And I don't even do those very often. So it's making less weight feel like more by really emphasizing the contraction, controlling the negatives, getting more out of the weight. That's been the solution for me for the most part. I can't speak on the effectiveness of chiropractic and deep tissue. I do believe that deep tissue massage, if you find a really good therapist who gets in there and digs deep, it's definitely worth it. I feel better. I have better mobility, less pain when I do that on a regular basis. Typically I do that twice a month. Chiropractor, I've been slacking. I haven't done that in a while. I used to go once a week pretty regularly, or a couple times a month, and there was a period for a whole year where I went 3 times a week because I was trying to fix some issues with my neck, and it didn't really, from the x-rays before and after, it didn't really affect it much. So that's the main reason I kind of got away from the chiropractor. But get it checked out always. Any injury that's causing you a lot of pain, if you have the insurance and can afford it, get an MRI done to see if there's what's exactly happening in there. If you have a torn muscle or the joints are injured, you're never really going to know unless you have x-rays and MRIs. MRIs really see everything, so that's what I would encourage. But basically, you always want to come back to training gradually, very, very slowly. Like when I tore my tricep, obviously it was in a cast for a little while, and when I came back to able to do any kind of training, it was super, super light, like really light. I'm talking like, push downs with just the very first, the first pin, whatever, 20 or 30, whatever that is on a stack. Things like that. And, as time went on, I would go a little bit heavier, but I took it very gradually because I was so scared of the sutures coming out and the tricep coming off. I did not want that to happen. And my orthopedic surgeon impressed upon me that could very well happen if I was foolhardy and pushed things too fast, that would happen. So that's been this edition of Ask Ron. Keep the questions coming. I enjoy this. Hope you guys do too. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.